Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and today's the first day of official Dominaria previews. And I know what you're thinking to yourself. Today's the first day of official previews? We've been seeing these cards for weeks now, and yeah, we kind of have. First, there was the leak from Wizards, which was an accidental posting. We got to see a lot of cards there, and they have been giving us cards over the last week and a half as well. But this is the beginning where the floodgates kind of get opened. We have a lot of cards to talk about today, so we're going to go through them a little bit faster than we were last week. Now, quickly, before we get started, just a really fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support what we do here at the channel. One of which is our Patreon page, that's down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon, and anything you purchase, once you go through that first link on Amazon, we'll get a small percentage. And then finally, Flipside Gaming, still offering a promo code for our viewers, so hopefully save some cash while you support us. And with that being said, hey, thank you to everyone, not only who looks at those links, but to all the viewers who make this channel what it is, and let's get into it. Board the Weatherlight. This costs a white and 1. It's a sorcery uncommon. And look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a historic card from among them and put it into your hands. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, let's talk about sealed and draft first. This is fine if you have enough historic targets. If you have a fair amount of targets and you're maybe in white, where we definitely are seeing so far that white appears to be the historic matters color. So there may be decks that want something like this. I wouldn't consider running probably more than one of, at least from what I'm seeing so far. But yeah, some decks will be just fine for you. Not a high draft pick. You can probably get this towards the end of a pack at some point if you feel like it's going to be fine for your deck. Just kind of grab it and don't necessarily take up a spot from the beginning or the middle portion of the pack, because I do think these will be abundant enough. They're only going to be out there for people that really care about historic. Now, what about standard? It's just a little too slow. That's the problem with this card. It costs 2 and it's sorcery speed. If it was like a 1 casting cost, maybe. If it was instant, maybe. But 2 at sorcery, I don't see it getting there. And it's also contingent upon what kind of deck you're playing. If you don't have a lot of legendaries or artifacts or sagas in your deck in standard, which a lot of times you probably won't, then of course this won't make your build. So just generally, I think what makes this card maybe worse than, say, Commune with Dinosaurs, for example, is unless it's a legendary land, you can't hit a land with this. And that's a little bit awkward. I feel like if it was maybe land as well, that would be slightly different. But again, it just doesn't get there for me at this point when it comes to constructed magic. Cabal Evangel. This is a black and 1. It's a human cleric. It's a common 2/2. I know we're a little spoiled nowadays with the 2/2s with upside. We seem to see them all the time. So when you see a 2/2 for 2, you're kind of like, okay, sure. And yeah, okay, sure, but you're still going to play this in limited and be really happy with it, as a matter of fact. It doesn't have to be a high draft pick, maybe a middle of the pack pick. It's just going to help you curve into your early stuff. The 2 spot of your limited decks is the most important spot. You don't want to not have enough 2 drops when you sit down at the table. You want to be able to give yourself some board presence, defend against some more aggressive builds, things of that nature, or maybe even be aggressive yourself. So this is a fine card, and you'll be happy to play it. Not really much to talk about outside of limited, though, here. Cabal Paladin. This is going to cost you a black and 3 human knight common 4/2. Whenever you cast a historic spell, this will deal 2 damage to each opponent. Well, here's my problem with this card. It trades down a lot of the time. I don't like these 4/2s for 4. Now, the ability is interesting. And again, the only reason I see myself playing this, well, maybe 2 reasons. One, if I'm just really desperate for a 4-drop creature, which sometimes happens, especially in sealed if your pool's a little limited. Or I'm in a situation where I have a whole bunch of targets. I have a bunch of historic cards in my deck, and I feel like I might find enough value if I play this. Other than that, I'm probably skipping this for just better things, ultimately. And again, because it is a 4 cost 4/2, I don't see this seeing play in standard or anything like that. It is a knight, but even if you're trying to push knights a little bit in whatever build you're in, whether that be commander or casual play, or even trying to build a standard deck, I just think there's going to be better knights for you. Culligo Skin Witch. This costs a black and 1 human wizard, common 1/3, kicker black and 3, and when this enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, each opponent discards 2 cards. So again, much like the last card, the effect impacts every opponent, which I like that they're thinking about multiplayer. This card is okay for you in limited. It's not always going to make your cuts. Basically, if you're in a slower, more controlling, methodical deck, this is going to be okay for you. Maybe Dimir colors or something along those lines, because you want to slow the game down. You want to gum up the ground a little bit in those early turns so you can get your mana under you and start doing your removal or your counter magic and playing your win conditions, things of that nature. So especially in drafts, this could be fine. It's not going to make all builds, though. If it's not in your main and you come up against a hyper-aggressive build, you might want to side it in, considering it's a 1/3 for 2. Also worth mentioning, it is a wizard, and sometimes that will be relevant. Other than that, I like the kicker because it does make the card more relevant later in the game. So it's not a bad draw towards the end of the game where you're kind of like, well, at least I can pay the kicker and do something. Although at that point, who knows if your opponent has any relevant cards left in their hand either, especially if you're like in a board stall or something like that. But at least it gives you some options, and I do like that about it. So nothing crazy, again, nothing that will cross over into standard. Demon Lord Bells and Lock. Okay, this is a mythic, 2 black, for a legendary creature, Elder Demon, 6/6, flying trample. When this enters the battlefield, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Then put that card into your hands. If the card's converted mana cost is 4 or greater, repeat this process, and this will deal 1 damage to you for each card put into your hand this way. We'll begin with limited. This is first pickable all day long in draft. And it's a mythic, you won't see it a whole lot, but when it does show up either in your draft or your seal pool and you're comfortable with the black that you have there, you're going to want to play this card. Even if you just read the beginning of it, 6/6 flying trample for 6. That alone makes me say, sign me up, I will be happy to run this any day of the week. And the ability is actually even better. Now that self-mill ability, don't let that make you nervous. Unless you're like at the end of the game and you're almost out of cards or something like that, this is not going to impact you in a negative way at all. Now 40 card decks in limited, I mean be careful. Occasionally you might be in a weird spot, but 99% of the time that's not going to hurt you at all. Nor is the 1 damage you're going to take for getting the card. Basically this is going to replace itself when it enters the battlefield with a new card and you take 1 point of damage. Sometimes you'll get a second card and take 2. Maybe every once in a while, rarely, you might get a third card and take 3. But I think for most builds, you're going to have a real natural curve. You're going to be hitting something low curve much more frequently than something higher curve 4 or 5, for example, or more. So I'm not too worried about the damage. I'm not worried about the self-mill. Just be smart about it. I'm going to play this and be really, really happy about it. Standard, I think it might see some standard play, maybe in a control build, Dimir, maybe Grixis, something like that. It is borderline a little expensive. It's 6, but it does have a big payout and it does replace itself. It's a formidable creature that has to have an answer by your opponent or else they're in a lot of trouble very quickly. And even if they do have an answer, you're getting another card out of the deal. So that actually feels pretty good to me. And I don't think this is going to show up like in 4 of or anything like that at that casting cost. But maybe like a 2 of or something along those lines. I'd at least want to test it out if nothing else. I do think it's a little too expensive for other formats like Modern or Legacy or something. Commander, casual play, yeah, I'll play this in a cube. I'll play this in a Commander deck. Why not? I think it's strong enough. And again, it's just sold me on the whole fact that it replaces itself. That's a big deal for me. And recently, we've seen smaller creatures that do that. In Rivals of Ixalan, we had the Vampire that cost a black and 1. You played that, you took a point of damage, and got to draw a card. This kind of does the same thing. It's more expensive, but it also lets you get past land. So you know you're not drawing a land. Not that necessarily drawing a land's a bad thing, but if you cast this for 6, you probably don't need a land right away. It's letting you actually get to your heat and even giving you the chance of perhaps drawing another card and taking an extra point of damage too. So that's pretty sweet. Overall, I do like the design here. It feels like it should be complicated, but once you get past all that text, it's actually pretty simple and elegant. Next we have Knight of Malice. This is a black and 1 human knight, uncommon, first strike 2/2 hexproof from white. Knight of Malice gets +1/+0 as long as any player controls a white permanent. I won't spend too much time on this card because we talked about the white version of the card a few days back. So this one, though, still really good. I mean, here's a 2 casting cost 2/2 with tons of upsides. You're going to be really happy to play this in limited. Draft, this is maybe first pickable in some packs. I do think it's a really strong pick. A 2/2 first striker for just 2 mana, plus the hexproof from white. Now remember, with hexproof from white, that means this creature can't be the target of white spells or abilities your opponents control. By definition, hexproof has nothing to do with combat. So it can be blocked by a white creature. It can take damage in combat from white creatures. So do remember that. But now, if you're in a black and white build, there's even a chance that this has a good opportunity to come out as a 3/2. And that's kind of awesome. If your opponent's in white, same thing. So that's brilliant. I mean, a 3/2 for a striker for 2 would be incredible. So this gets a little bit better, maybe if you can draft Orzhov colors, and there is a knight synergy between those two colors. So there are other cards that will have payoffs for you playing knights. So that could get even better if you can draft around that. That is truly a draft archetype from what we're seeing. Even in sealed, you might not be able to get a fully formed version of that deck, but there will be some cards that will synergize well with this. So as far as standard goes, I said this before, I'm a little skeptical that the Knight deck can get there just with the cards that are pouring in from this set, because we just saw Rivals of Ixalan and Ixalan pour tribal elements for 4 different tribes into standard, and unfortunately, none of them really became like a true top-tier tribal deck. Some of them did pretty good, some did well. However, none of those 4 tribes really became a consistent top finisher or anything like that. So would one set be able to push Knights to that level? I'm afraid I just really don't think so. But we haven't seen the whole set yet, so I will reserve judgment on that. This is still going to be great, though, for casual play, whether you have a Knight theme in your cubes or maybe playing a Knight Commander deck. This would be a perfect inclusion there. Alright, let's get serious now. With a Planeswalker and a very classic character, Jaya Ballard. 3 red and 2. Legendary Planeswalker Jaya. Mythic, 5 loyalty. +1, add 3 red mana. Spend this mana only to cast instant or sorcery spells. +1, discard up to 3 cards, then draw that many cards, -8. You get an emblem with, you may cast instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard. If a card cast this way would go to the graveyard, instead exile it. Alright, first off, very happy to see Jaya as a Planeswalker. Awesome character. We've seen her in creature form in the past, her younger self anyway. And she has had some of the most memorable lines of flavor text in old school Magic. And that's awesome now to see her not only back again, but back as a Planeswalker. Fantastic. So do you play this card? We'll talk about Limited first. Limited, yeah, it's really good. I mean, the only downside is 3 reds. So yeah, every deck won't be able to swing that necessarily. But you know what? If you have the opportunity to play this card, you're going to try your best to make it work. If you can do it, wonderful, because that second ability is going to be great. The first ability might not be awesome in all draft and sealed decks, right? Because many times those will be creature-centric. But that second +1 is fantastic. You draw into too many lands, you draw into cards you can't use right now, and this is going to help you cycle through your stuff and get to what you need to win the game, hopefully. Again, that ultimate, probably not super exciting, again, in a lot of draft and sealed decks, but it's there, and sometimes it will be relevant for sure, especially considering it doesn't take too long to get there. So if you can play this thing, if you feel comfortable swinging that casting cost, then I would say go for it. It's probably first pickable. I usually don't like to commit first pick to a card that's like 3 on color, but in this case, I'll make an exception because I do think this is an awesome, awesome card to have, a huge bomb. Now, what about standard? Again, 5 casting costs, 3 on color, but you know what? We've seen 5, 6 casting cost Planeswalkers do well in standard before. I think this card will, whether it's this meta or future metas or both. I do think this does see standard play. I do want to test this in the current version of Mono Red Aggro because one of the downsides of that deck is sometimes you just run out of gas. So your opponent has the right answers at the right time. Your smaller creatures become kind of irrelevant. And if they have something that takes care of, say, your Phoenix or something along those lines, sometimes you lose because you start your run out of cards and you just need to restock. This would help you restock, especially if you draw into some extra lands or some things that aren't doing well for you. So maybe a 1, 2 of in the deck. I'd at least want to test it out. And it's funny because those decks, a lot of them nowadays don't even main deck Chandra anymore. I mean, she's in the sideboards of many of the builds. So I wouldn't want to go crazy with this card because you don't want to take the pressure off the battlefield either. But I do think it's a nice card to maybe be able to pick up in the middle portion of the game, put down, and be able to refuel and restock. And I think that can be really important for aggro decks just generally. Now, when it comes to those sorcery instant abilities, again, that are on the card, the current mono red aggro deck that you see that's the most popular is a little more creature-centric. It's got a lot of small creatures doing their damage, and then it goes into the Phoenixes, and then sometimes even sideboarding in Glorybringers and such. So that's kind of the plan more so than burn, although there is burn in there, and this could be relevant at times for that burn as well. But again, I'm more excited about this card because of that second +1, even more so than the other abilities on here, even for standard. So once you start getting into, say, modern, I think it gets a little too expensive for what it's doing, unfortunately. And there's some other ways to restock your hand that's probably more efficient in those formats if you're playing burn or something. But at least for standard, I actually do think this is a good card. And I think as time goes on and we see rotation this fall and new sets come in, perhaps, who knows, the red decks might become more instant sorcery centric. And if that's the case, this card could get even better. Also, for casual play, commander and such, kind of awesome if you're playing a deck that has a lot of instants and sorceries, no doubt. Alright, you're going to see a lot of the Weatherlight crew today. A lot of those are revealed. And the first one we're looking at is Raff Capashen, Ship's Mage. And this is going to cost you a blue, white, and 2. Legendary creature, human wizard, uncommon, 3/3. Flash, flying. You may cast historic spells as though they had flash. So here's what I like about this card for limited. This is a 4 casting cost 3/3 flyer with flash. Yes, it is 2 different colors, but that's still kind of awesome. And this is going to win some games, as a matter of fact. And you know what? At uncommon, you might be able to pick up a couple of these in a draft. It is 2 different colors, especially like pack 1, maybe you start to gravitate towards Azorius. Pack 2, if you're the only person that's picking up Azorius colors, you might be able to grab one of these, and then maybe pack 3, you grab another one. I'm not even that concerned about the other ability, playing the historic spells as if they had flash. I mean, that's cool, and sometimes it will definitely be relevant, but I just want that 3/3 flyer for 4 instant speed. That's what I'm talking about. So it is legendary, keep that in mind. You can't play 2 at the same time, unfortunately, but still, I think the card is good enough that, yeah, I don't want to say necessarily pick one just because it's a dual color card. But if you're moving into those colors and then you pick this up, you'll be pretty happy about it. Also, it is a wizard, which might be relevant at least some of the time. As far as standard goes, I do think it's a little too slow there for 4 mana. And again, yeah, 3/3 flyers with flash are good, but there's a lot of really good things that you can do right now in the standard format. And I think there's other cards that are a little bit faster that have a bigger impact. Commander, if you have a lot of historics, maybe you're playing an artifact build or something like that, could be an interesting card to perhaps include. Alright, another Planeswalker. Now this one we saw as a Russian language preview today. However, it was part of the big accidental leak that happened a few weeks ago, and Scryfall made a mock-up of it then. So you see that mock-up on the left side of the screen for the English translation. But this is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. A blue, a white, and 3 legendary Planeswalker Teferi, of course a mythic, 4 loyalty, +1, draw a card at the beginning of the next end step, untap 2 lands, -3, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, third from the top, -8, you get an emblem with, whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent an opponent controls. Okay, this card is also sweet. Again, if there's a drawback, it's the casting cost being 5, and of course being 2 different colors. Let's talk about limited first. Yeah, you know what? Play it. The drawing a card is awesome. 5 casting cost if you're in these colors and feel like you can swing it. And it is splashable too, even considering it is a white and blue. So if you're in white heavily or blue heavily, you might even be able to splash this. But regardless, that +1 draw a card, even if it just ended right there, this kind of has me. I mean, if I can draw a card and have the Planeswalker on the battlefield that my opponent's going to have to deal with now, I'm actually pretty happy right there. Not to mention the other stuff going on. That -3, your opponent's big bomb creature they play, you can tempo that down a little bit and give yourself some time to get damage across or find an answer. That's pretty awesome. That -8 kind of feels like a win more, actually, no matter what format you're playing. If you get there, you probably would have won anyway. So I'm not super concerned about that. It is sweet, but I'm really more concerned about the +1 and the -3. Those are going to be really helpful abilities for you. Let's talk about constructed magic now. Standard. I do think this sees standard play. Yes, I know it's starting to skirt the higher casting cost with 5. But again, we've seen 5, 6 casting costs. Planeswalkers get there before. I do think this is great for Azorius Control. And if any deck can swing a higher casting cost card, it is a deck like Azorius Control. They're going to be more land heavy anyway. So you put this on the battlefield for 5, and now you can draw the card. And more importantly, maybe tapping 2 lands. So you're always able to have counter magic up, or at least be able to bluff for counter spells. And that's actually kind of awesome. So you get some mana efficiency there as well as the extra card. That's huge. And again, just like I said with limited, if your opponent snuck something out early and you weren't able to remove it or counter it, now you have the opportunity to tempo a little bit. And by the time they get it back, hopefully you have an answer for it. So maybe it's a counter spell or something else. that's actually pretty awesome. And again, yeah, the -8's the -8. Cool if it happens, but if it happens, your opponent's probably scooping if they haven't already. So besides that, I would say maybe a little too expensive for Modern, but I'm not going to say completely unplayable. I could see like a one of these showing up in like control build or like one in the sideboard or something like that. 5's a little expensive, and you do have to think. I mean, look at Jace the Mind Sculptor right now. Jace is in Modern, doing fine, but not necessarily like blowing up the format either. So if Jace is kind of like okay, then this card doesn't feel like it's going to be all that great. However, again, as a one of, I think it could be kind of interesting. I would at least want to test it out. Nothing more than that, though, I don't think. Commander play? Yeah, sure. I would try it out there. I mean, a lot of cards have been into Commander, obviously, but again, if you're trying to play more of a controlling, methodical build, I think this could be a nice inclusion for you. And it is a little narrow. I mean, it doesn't do anything to all opponents like so many of the cards that are printed nowadays do, but I still think that the power level is still pretty decent. Even if you're just drawing extra cards and getting some mana efficiency out of it, I think it could be good enough. Arvid the Cursed, another Weatherlight crew member. This is a black, a white, and 3. Legendary creature, Vampire Knight, uncommon 3/3, Death Touch, Lifelink, other legendary creatures you control. Get +2/+2. Let's talk about limited first, your draft and sealed. It's a good card. I mean, 3/3, Death Touch, Lifelink, even though you're paying 5 for it. Yeah, that's actually really strong. Like, you'll be happy to play that. I love Death Touch in limited games. Even like the 1/1 Death Touchers. I'm always a sucker for those. I play them all the time. And this one I realize costs more, and it is 2 different colors, but I do think with a lifelink attached, the 3/3 and that ability, it's more than worth it, quite honestly. You'll be really happy when you can pick these up in draft if you're in those colors. And that's the thing, with draft, it might be an awkward pick one, for example, again, because of the dual colors. But once you feel like you might be moving into those colors and other people perhaps are moving into different colors, you may have some opportunities to even grab a couple of these, and that's kind of sweet. It is legendary. But again, with the 3 toughness, I'd be okay playing a couple in my deck. I feel like it wouldn't be a burden or anything like that. Now, aside from that, the abilities sometimes will be relevant. We already know that there's going to be at least 1 legendary in each pack. Now, that doesn't always mean creature, but there'll be a fair amount of creatures going around. We've seen a lot of uncommon legendary creatures, for example, and we're seeing more today. So, yeah, it just feels like there's going to be times where that will matter as well. What about standard? I don't really see it getting there. I think it's too expensive for what it's doing. It's a solid creature again, and if I had a lot of legendary creatures or something, well, even better, but I don't really see that panning out necessarily in standard, just due to the fact that standard decks need to be consistent, and putting too many legendary creatures in a deck is not going to feel very consistent, so I don't really see it there. Maybe the vampire deck might want to run like one of these or something like that, but the vampire deck has some really good creatures in it already that are cheaper. This starts to feel a little expensive even for that, quite honestly. So I don't know, maybe I would test it, but honestly, I don't know if I would even bother putting it in there. Now, Commander, though, we do know vampire decks have been popular, and this is just a nice addition to those decks. Not necessarily your Commander or anything, but a nice addition. Jechura, Weatherlight Captain, and Jechura is back, another character I'm happy to see return, and this time now she's the captain of the Weatherlight. That's pretty cool. A red, a blue, and 2, legendary creature, human artificer, mythic 3/3. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. So, pretty simple, but there is definitely some power behind this card, no doubt. So, do you play this in limited? Well, much like I said with some of the other cards in draft, it's an awkward pack one, pick one because of the 2 colors. And also, it is asking you to have some historic spells to be really good. With that being said, though, again, there is a legendary spot in the packs. I don't think it's going to be that hard to make this card relevant in draft especially. Even in sealed, probably going to be relevant most of the time. For some reason, if it wasn't and you were still in those colors, would you play it? 50-50, I would say. Sometimes you do need a 4-drop, like I was talking about earlier. A 3/3 for 4 like is fine, even though, again, it is 2 different colors. Not the best thing, not the worst thing, but definitely playable. But again, you really want to play this with historic spells to back it up, because if you can move faster through your deck, that's going to be awesome. Your opponent's going to have to deal with that if that's the case. So it can be great, I think, in some builds, maybe a little mediocre in others. What about standard? Well, you know, a while back we had all the Kaladesh cards, and they did have these Izzet artifact decks that were doing okay. They've kind of been pushed out of the meta now. Could a card like this revitalize those decks? I don't think this alone can. Now, if we get other pieces in this set that help that deck, then maybe that deck does make a comeback. As it stands right now, though, I'm not sold. I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch, and we'll have to see a lot more before I'm there. But this is at least a start. It's a step in the right direction, no doubt. When it comes to other constructed formats like Modern, Legacy, Vintage, yes, there are more ways to abuse this card with cheap artifacts, zero casting cost artifacts and such. However, at the same time, there's also a lot of other ways to abuse those cards in those formats that aren't going to cost you a red, blue, and 2 to get started. So I don't really see it doing anything there necessarily. Casually, yeah, there's some cool combos you can pull off with this and cheap zero casting cost artifacts. Yeah, absolutely. Like maybe it's something for your cube or for commander. A lot of things you could do there, I'm sure. Whether this is your commander or it's just part of your 99, it might have some good synergy with some of the decks out there already. Overall, kind of wish this wasn't a mythic, but I understand. I mean, she's the captain, and also that can be a powerful effect in certain circumstances, so I guess I get it. Slimefoot the Stowaway. Alright, another member of the crew. Green, black, 1. Legendary creature fungus, uncommon, 2/3. Whenever a sapperling you control dies, this will deal 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. 4, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. Let's talk about limited first again. Yeah, all the other stuff I said about the 2 color, first pick, first pack, but aside from that, if you can get a hold of one of these and you're in these colors, or even 2 of these, even though it is legendary, be careful, then you could be having a pretty good day. Because first off, I love that mana sink. I am a fan of mana sinks in limited games, just generally, draft or sealed, because you get those board stalls sometimes, and if you have mana late game, you can really swing a game with something like this, especially if you have a sack outlet. But even if you don't, this is still going to be really good and start to close in on your opponent, leaving them with less and less options as time goes on. That's phenomenal. Aside from that, what about standard? Okay, I'm going to say this. I love aristocrat style decks. I love the one that was popular in standard back with Return to Ravnica. I would love to see something like that happen again. And I don't know if the pieces are there yet, but if we get more cards, I really hope that it could happen, because I just want to play that. And this card would be a key part of it if it does get there. Golgari, Aristocrats, that would be super sweet. But again, I think we need to see more pieces before I'm sold on it, but I really want it to happen. What about casual play, though? Awesome. Whether it's a cube with maybe sapperling tribal elements to it, or a commander deck, sapperling tribal, that could be really fun. And notice that ability does hit all opponents, so that's kind of awesome. There's a lot of sweet things you can probably do with this with commander, especially with some old cards from back in the Fallen Empire days or something. Or Time Spiral also had sapperlings in that set as well, so there's a lot of stuff you can find if you dig through the archives, no doubt, through your bulk. So, yeah, really cool card. I'm excited to try this one out myself. Tiana, Ship's Caretaker. Okay, this is another member of the crew. A white, a red, and 3, legendary creature, Angel Artificer, uncommon, 3/3, flying first strike. When an aura or equipment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to its owner's hands at the beginning of the next end step. For limited purposes, again, yeah, it's fine. If you're in these colors, you pick this up, a 3/3 flying first strike will be fine for you. And that ability does make auras a little better, a little more desirable, equipment even a little more desirable perhaps. And that's not a bad thing either. Standard, though, I'm going to say this. This is a card that is just way too slow. 5 casting cost, 3/3 flying first strike is not going to do it there, especially as a legendary. Again, you can play a Rekindling Phoenix for 2 red and 2. So, yeah, compare the 2 there, right? So you're not really going to see that. Again, the ability is also not going to be hyper relevant, I think, most of the time, because of the fact that it's not even that fast. It goes back to your hands, not directly into play. So again, if it went into play, maybe you could think of some combos and such, but going to your hand is just too slow, especially for that casting cost, unfortunately. Commander, now if you do have a aura / equipment centric deck, well, here's a card for you. Icy Manipulator. Okay, this is one of the original cards from Alpha Beta Unlimited. It's been reprinted many times since then, though. It costs 4, it's an artifact, uncommon. You pay 1, tap, and then tap target artifact, creature, or land. The question, does this hold up in today's Magic? Unfortunately, usually not. We'll talk about limited first. Like, this is fine in limited. It's actually very serviceable. It's not a bad card. There's times it might not make your cut just because you have better things. Maybe a lot of good removal or something like that. But I would say probably more than half the time you'll play this and you're going to be fine with it. It is going to tap down something that's important to your opponent once it gets on the battlefield. The problem is it costs 4. A little expensive by today's standards for what this does. But once it's out there, it only costs 1 to activate, and it can tie up some of your opponent's mana. It can deal with a problematic creature. It can deal with a problematic artifact. So that's pretty good. But again, there's going to be times where you're just going to feel like, I think I just have better stuff in this pool. Standard, definitely not. Not for 4 mana. Not anymore, unfortunately. I love the card. I love you, Icy, but your time for Standard, I think, has passed. It's just too expensive for what it does there. Now, beyond that, we know what it does in the other formats where it's legal, and unfortunately, that's pretty much nothing. But, oh well. At least I'll give them points for nostalgia. And the art, even though this isn't a good photograph of the card, actually looks pretty sweet. Alright, here's a big one. It's Mox Amber. On the right, you see the German language preview card, which came out today. On the left, you see the mock-up from Scryfall, which came out a few weeks back when the accidental leak occurred. Now, the translated version, of course, is the mock-up, but it does say rare there. It's actually mythic. So I'm sure when they were making these, they were just kind of doing it quickly. But just keep that in mind. It actually is a mythic. So anyway, Mox Amber, 0, legendary artifact, mythic, tap, add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers you control. Let me start off by saying this. Fast mana finds a way. No matter what crazy drawback they try to put on these cards, fast mana always, always, always will find a way to work. And people will figure out how to make this card good. So don't let that throw you too much. First drawback, it's legendary, but we've seen in the past that's not a big deal for Moxes. Throw down a Mox Opal, for example, tap it for your mana, throw down another one, get rid of the old one, tap the new one for mana. It's not the end of the world. Definitely still can be good. Secondly, that drawback that you need a legendary creature or planeswalker in play, yeah, that's a little harder to pull off, I think. But you know what? When the reward is there, being able to skip ahead of curve is a huge reward. And people are going to find a way to make this work efficiently, I have no doubt. And the other thing I want to point out, it does say add 1 mana of any color. So it can add colorless mana. So if you have a legendary artifact creature out, this thing is still not able to do anything for you. It can't give you colorless mana. So remember that. Okay. With all that out of the way, limited, yeah, 99% of the time I think it's good. The problem is there might be some decks that aren't running a lot of legendary creatures sometimes. That could happen. Maybe even in sealed especially. But if that happens, perhaps you have to skip this card, which would be kind of heartbreaking, I'm sure. But if you can make it work, and I think most of the time you'll be fine. Again, there's the legendary spot. They won't all be creatures and planeswalkers or anything like that, but there is a legendary spot. So keep that in mind. You will have opportunities, I think, to play this card, and it will be good for you, no doubt. Because again, even if it doesn't turn on until maybe turn 3, 4, 5, just being able to skip ahead of curve, even in the mid portion of the game, is still really good. Maybe not as good later in the game, but even in the middle of the game, it is still a good effect to have on the battlefield. Now, what about Standard? Again, I'm going to say it one more time. It's going to find a way. Fast mana finds a way. This will get into Standard. Now, it may take some time for people to figure out the most efficient way to use this card, but I think it shows up in probably more than one build, honestly, especially once we see the full set here and find out really all the options that we have for legendary creatures and such. This is going to be awesome as well in casual games, whether you're putting this in your cube or you're playing it in Commander. This will be fantastic in Commander, no doubt, to help you just accelerate a little bit, especially in a format where legendary creatures and planeswalkers are going to be a lot more available to you. What about the other formats, though, like Vintage, Legacy, Modern? I think Modern play, I do think it gets there. Vintage and Legacy, maybe not, because they do have a lot of other options. Although, I mean, Mox Opal does see tons of Vintage plays, so I don't want to count it out, but it would take a little time, I think, for me to really think about where this would fit into some of those Eternal formats, if it could at all. But I would definitely not count it out at this point, because again, Moxes are powerful cards, and even this one, maybe the least powerful of any Mox, is still going to be good. Alright, here's another really iconic card here, Weatherlight. So very simple, the art looks amazing, and a big part of the history of Dominaria here. This costs 4, it's a legendary artifact vehicle, mythic for 5 flying, crew cost of 3. Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a historic card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. Okay, so this is very reminiscent a little bit of Dragonlord Ojutai, although I do think Dragonlord Ojutai is a better card, don't get me wrong, but this is a little reminiscent of it. Let's talk about limited first. Is this going to be good for you? Sure it is. You know, even if you don't have a lot of historic targets in your deck, a 4/5 flying crew cost 3 for 4, that's going to be good. Like, you're going to play that and be really happy. Easily first pickable. It keeps you open to colors as well, which is nice, unlike a lot of the cards we've been seeing today. So that's kind of awesome. Fantastic there. Definitely a bomb, no doubt. Standard, I think it could see a little bit of standard play, and I'm thinking maybe work it into the Mardu Vehicles deck. Mardu Vehicles, I know, has been seeing less and less play as this meta's gone on, unfortunately, for people that enjoy that deck. But again, I think when we reset with a new meta and more cards are added like this one, it could have its day again, especially early on in the meta. I do think it is the type of deck a lot of people will gravitate towards in an early portion of a new meta, and that's what we saw with this past meta as well. So with that being said, I don't think you go crazy and throw 4 in there or anything, but maybe a 1 or 2 of. I'd at least want to test it out. Once you get past Mardu Vehicles, though, at least right now, I don't see a lot of other opportunities to find homes for this card in Standard. So I don't know, after Kaladesh actually rotates out, maybe this card won't see all that much play. But again, we got a lot more cards to add by the time that happens, so who knows, maybe a whole new direction will come. Finally, again, casual play, cubes or your commander deck, this is going to be a really strong utility card for sure, as long as you feel comfortable crewing it and have enough historic cards to hit with it, especially commander. Like, I could see a lot of artifact-centric decks or decks that have a lot of legendary cards in them. This could be something that you might be interested in playing. All right, with that being said, those are the Dominaria preview cards for today. And we'll be back tomorrow with another video recapping everything that happens over the next 24 hours. So join us then. Until next time, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.